This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Maayan Silver. Today we ask J.R. Ross about both Washington and Madison. Ross is editor of WisPolitics.com. Welcome, J.R. Thanks for being here.
No, thanks for having me.
All right, so during his first 2 weeks in office, Republican President Donald Trump has fired federal prosecutors and agency watchdogs across the government. He offered government employees payouts to resign, threatening mass layoffs if they didn't. He tried to freeze trillions of dollars of federal grants and loans. Almost all USAID staff are being placed on leave, and the FBI and Education Department are also on the chopping block. Elon Musk, who hasn't been elected, has nearly unfettered access to the Treasury Department's payment system, which disperses trillions in payments each year, including Social Security checks and federal salaries. Wow, that was a mouthful. What are your takeaways in watching this unfold, JR? And do you know at this point the main ways this could be affecting people in Wisconsin?
Well, on the first question, talking to people, it's been kind of like the Trump trademark of like shock and awe, like flood the zone with so many things going on. There's just so much coming out of D.C. that it makes it hard for Democrats to find their footing to respond. When there was the order that kind of seemed to freeze, at least temporarily, payments for domestic programs, Democrats found their feet for a little bit and had like some solid ground to push back. It's been interesting to watch the reaction to the freeze, for example, on U.S. aid, which, I'm not going to debate the policy was good or bad, but if you look at the election last fall, people, generally speaking, they wanted change. They did not want to keep sending money overseas. They want to focus on the United States. That was the choice they made, and you're seeing it a little bit more difficult for Democrats to kind of find their footing, pushing back on that stuff. Not saying there isn't something valuable there to push back upon, but it's a different dynamic. And what I'm getting at is that if it's stuff that hurts people in this country, Democrats seem to have a better shot at getting the public to buy in and be concerned. When it's something going overseas, it's not nearly as clean a message for them. As for what's impacting us in Wisconsin, we're trying to figure that out every day. It's been interesting. You see Head Start, for example, say they're having problems accessing funding that's been allocated to them and making payroll. So there's definitely some impacts coming. We see UW-Madison, for example, trying to navigate what's this mean for research projects? How should we going forward? We just don't really know right now. Oh, by the way, will there be more coming down the pipe because there's a budget that's due from Governor Evers in next week. The 18th, he's supposed to release it. Could that be impacted? We don't know. We just don't. That's the bottom. We just don't know for sure what this all means. It could take a while for the dust to settle.
And you mentioned Democratic Attorney General Josh Call's joining in out of a lawsuit to pause the federal funding freeze. What's the latest on that, and how else are people in Wisconsin pushing back?
Well, we've seen a couple of pauses. One from the multi-state effort that Call joined. There's another in another federal court. We're seeing various lawsuits filed. There was a protest in Madison last week, just starting to kind of get its legs. What I'm kind of watching in my conversation with people is, if you go back to early years of the Obama administration, right? Obama won this big election, pushed some big changes to deal with the economy at the time and the Affordable Care Act. And you saw this kind of groundswell begin that at first seemed not very big, but it built over that first year of the the Obama administration and became the Tea Party movement. Will we see Democrats get organized, get off the mat after, pretty crushing defeat in November and start to push back in an effective way? Talking to people on the Capitol, they will tell you that Democrats were definitely depressed in November after their loss. And their wonder was, what will get them back into kind of like be motivated to get engaged? Well, Donald Trump has unique effect on Democrats, unique motivator when it comes to Democrats. And so they're watching, do these policies serve to kind of get people going in? And two, there's just so much going on. Is it so much chaos that just kind of gets people like overwhelmed with what's coming out of Washington, D.C. and makes it harder to get motivated?
So, one of the other things the Trump administration is trying to do is scrub DEI from the government. He ordered that each federal agency must get rid of that, and environmental justice offices. Major corporations which signed on to DEI efforts are just as quickly dismantling those programs. Can you remind us of what's happened related to DEI in recent years in Wisconsin, and where do you think the battle over DEI will continue to play out here?
The most obvious thing is with the universities of Wisconsin It's been a year or so where Robin Vos, the Assembly Speaker, struck a deal with UW leaders to freeze the number of DEI positions in the system, to reassign them, some of them to other jobs. And in return, he agreed to allow pay raises to take effect for UW employees. Well, don't forget, Robin Vos and Republican lawmakers in general asked the Legislative Audit Bureau, which is the nonpartisan kind of audit arm of the legislature, to do a review of DEI across state government. That review is going to be out any day now. We're watching for that. That will be the platform that Republican lawmakers use in the budget to try to root out DEI in state government. It's going to be fascinating to watch how that debate plays out, how Governor Evers reacts to that, and what Democratic lawmakers do, right? Because we have this thing in politics where we kind of fight the last battle when we're trying to do the next one. And I'm getting at is that DEI was a big deal in 2024. Immigration is a big deal in 2024. Will they be a big issue going forward? We'll see. You know, do the actions that Trump has taken, will they take those things off the table and make people not really concerned about them, right? So I don't know. That's a ways and away. But watch for that DEI audit come up with lawmakers and watch how they use that in this budget to target programs that state now pays for.
And you mentioned immigration as well in your answer there. Last week, Wisconsin Republicans sort of telegraphed their idea. They have a bill to require people who are arrested on felony charges to prove that they're in the country legally. If the person can't do that, then the whatever county sheriff would be in that particular situation would have to report the person to the Department of Homeland Security. What's the discourse right now about that bill?
Well, there are a couple of things. One, there's the policy. Republicans believe in it. It is definitely a message coming out of Washington, D.C. with the Trump administration of cracking down on those here without documentation. And the public, generally speaking, the polls, agrees with it. What I'm watching is how the politics play out. Again, Governor Evers, he hasn't said he's going to run in 2026. If he does, if this bill gets to his desk, he vetoes it, will it be an issue next fall? Maybe. I'm not going to predict what's going to be the dominant issue a year and 10 months from now, whatever it is, until that election, so we'll see. Also, for Democrats, they picked a lot of seats in the Assembly and the Senate this past fall in the new maps. Robin Vos, the Assembly Speaker, he wants to put some of these new members in the Assembly on record. Where do you stand on these immigration issues? After the rhetoric you had on the campaign trail, where are you at on this issue? And could it be fodder for campaign ads next fall? Because politics never rests in this building. There's always something political going on or something behind the door about what's happening policy-wise. Will this be an issue next fall? Maybe. But it is a vote that could put some Democrats in a tough position being fresh in the building.
There's support for policies that allow undocumented people to work here and live here if they don't have criminal records. I was looking for the Marquette poll that says that.
The way you ask those polling questions can really influence how the numbers. I've seen all kinds of gaps or ranges of poll results when it comes to asking the question, depending how you ask it, right? And so there is, though, if you look at some polls, there is support to have deportations of people who aren't here legally. So again, depends how you ask it, but I'm not getting the impression from my conversations so far that there are many people who think that Trump and the administration targeting people who are accused of criminal crimes, who have a criminal history, that there's going to be a blowback for trying to target those folks and have them removed from the country. The question becomes, if you move to a true mass deportation system, like anybody here without documentation, and you start having massive roundups, tens or hundreds of thousands of people, then what happens? That's kind of like a ways away possibly, but we haven't quite got there yet to see how that might play out in the public eye.
I think what I found it was in the Marquette poll. It was that 60% of registered voters oppose deporting immigrants in the U.S. illegally who have jobs and no criminal record.
Yeah. So again, if you ask that with the jobs and no criminal record, you'll get a different response than other ones. So it depends. Again, I think the bigger picture right now is the focus has been on those who have some kind of a criminal record or accused of something. If that's the focus, I don't get the impression from my conversations that people think that there'll be any real blowback for Donald Trump for having that kind of a target.
Well, and one of the things you mentioned or sort of alluded to is that Democratic Governor Tony Evers is almost certainly likely to veto any Republican immigration bill that's coming up, and whether this tees up immigration to be a big talking point in 2026 is what you were saying you're not sure of. But there's also more to this bill. Republicans want county sheriffs to hold people on ICE detainers, so people who are on immigration warrants that assert that someone's violated immigration law, not necessarily criminal law. They're not arrested on criminal law. Currently, Dane and Milwaukee County Sheriff's Departments don't do that and hold people on ICE detainers. What can you tell us about this? Do you know anything about that aspect?
Sure. And that's part of the reason why there's a provision in that bill now. There's a similar bill introduced last session. This one includes a penalty that you would lose 15% of your shared revenue, which is state aid, if you don't comply. One thing I'm watching with this entire thing is what's happening at the federal level. The Trump administration, I believe, filed a lawsuit late last week against Chicago and the state of Illinois over some of their policies in place, saying that they are basically an impediment to what's going on with cracking on immigration. What happens there? That lawsuit could set the stage for how far-reaching the Trump administration can go with some stuff, go to the court, sign off on it. That could be really impact this whole debate going forward.
Okay, and all of this is also happening in a backdrop of, a Wisconsin Supreme Court election. We will definitely get into that in future Capitol Notes sessions, JR. So be on notice, of course, as you always are.
Yeah.
Yep. But a unanimous Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled Friday that Megan Wolf, the state's nonpartisan top elections official, can remain in her post despite not being reappointed and confirmed by the state Senate. She had been targeted for removal by Republican lawmakers over the 2020 presidential election. What can you tell us about that? And is that the last remnants of election denialism in the state government?
The court basically said, look, you guys, Republicans, passed a law to create the Elections Commission. You laid down who appoints the administrator, i.e. the 6-member election commission. You laid down how that process works, where it takes a majority of the commissioners to nominate somebody, then it's put to the state Senate for confirmation vote. But you didn't put in there a duty for the commission to nominate somebody new when an administrator's 4-year term ends. So remember, Wolf was first appointed to this, actually was an interim appointee in 2018, became the administrator full-time in 2019, was confirmed unanimously, and then in 2020, after that, she became the kind of the boogeyman for Trump supporters over Wisconsin elections. They were looking for a way to remove her ever since. Republicans, some of them have. And this kind of like knocks that back, that this is not how you're going to do it. Now, they can still impeach her. That's an option for Republicans to try to do something like that. They lack the 2/3 majority in the Senate now to get that through, so probably fruitful. But there's that. But you're still seeing remnants of Trump supporters who will not get over 2020, and things like a rules package for the Assembly Committee last week. The Elections Commission put together proposed rules that would set standards for election observers, so people at the polling sites who are watching what's going on. There are laws in place that say things like you could be no closer than 3 feet, but no farther than 8 feet from the action. Well, there's lots of latitude within those laws we have right now. These rules were designed, according to the Elections Commission, to provide more certainty for observers about where they can be, what they can view, the standard for removing somebody, for example. But some folks who are still unhappy about 2020 came out and said this is going to be a problem. We do not like these rules. And Republicans, they raised this question, a couple of lawmakers in this hearing of, okay, you guys are complaining, witnesses this hearing, about your treatment right now at polling sites. Are these rules better? Well, and you're complaining about how things are going right now, the way things are right now. Are these rules better for you than the status quo? And someone said no. They do not like these rules because they don't trust the Elections Commission and other things. It goes to show you that for Republicans, anytime you open that can of worms as election administration, you bring back this kind of like blowback from 2020, and it's still not died down almost 4.5 years later.
Interesting. Even though the Elections Commission itself is bipartisan and there's 3 Republicans on there, and there are conservative-leaning members of the state Supreme Court, and they all supported Megan Wolf.
Well, there is just a part of the Republican base does not trust Megan Wolf, and it never will. That's never going to go away. And there are Republican lawmakers who don't trust the Elections Commission because they feel like how they administered the election in 2020 was not correct. And that's not died down. It's not going away anytime soon. And remember, rules are a process where you take the structure of state law and you fill in the blanks, right? You address things that aren't addressed in state statutes. Republican lawmakers will tell you right now they'd rather try and pass a bill that does things to fill in those blanks than have the Election Commission do it because, again, they just don't trust them and likely never will.
What are the election bills on tap right now? And is the one that allows central account locations to start counting the night before?
It's supposed to be coming, but this session has been really quiet so far legislation-wise. We've seen some bills introduced, but it's been pretty light. They really have not started to kind of get going. And part of it is there are a couple of big Supreme Court decisions hanging out there. One, whether Governor Evers' 400-year veto on school spending is going to remain in place. And two, what the powers are for lawmakers to review administrative rules going forward. Depending on how those cases turn out, it's going to impact this session dramatically and what lawmakers want to do and what they're willing to do if the Supreme Court resets the rules and how the state capitol works in those fronts.
Well, thanks for the insights, JR, and thanks for joining me on Capitol Notes.
Anytime.
That was J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, speaking with me, WUWM's Maayan Silver. Listen for our segments every other Monday with an extended segment on lake effect, and check out the Capitol Notes podcast wherever you get your podcasts.